Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Tag Tuesday. I took last week's Tag Tuesday off after the week before that's kind of Tagapalooza, and I accumulated a few tags during the course of the week. So I think I have the one I'm doing today and then two more, which I will do over the course of the next few weeks. I'm going to kind of take it a little easier on tags, I think, here moving forward, and I'm not necessarily going to do them in order. So if you tag me to do a tag and I'm not doing it this Tuesday, I will try to get to it sometime soon. But I saw this tag over at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, Scott and Nell's channel. I watched it last night and they were kind enough to tag me to do it, and it looked really interesting, and it's one of those tags where I think we get to talk about things that are not just necessarily, assigning a book to a category, which I thought was great. The original tag was created by Jessica at Lady Lovestead Reads. That's not a channel I'm familiar with, but I'm going to head over there and check out her content and see what I think. It sounds really interesting, and this tag is really interesting. So the tag is the Pain Over Joy tag, and it essentially is kind of, I think, asking some pretty interesting questions about the nature of books, literature, and us as readers, and what we look for, or what we find, or what kind of things we want in a book. Anyway, so like I said, I thought the questions were interesting, so I wanted to do the tag right away. Scott and Nell did the kind of cool kids thing nowadays, which is to tag people up front. I'm going to do that too. So these are people who, I'm going to tag a lot of people. Sorry. These are people who I just enjoy hearing them talk. It's not that if you're not tagged, it doesn't mean I don't enjoy hearing you talk, but I just enjoy hearing these people talk about things that related to books. So it's going to be a lot of people, and some of these people are going to be people I tag all the time. Too bad, get over yourself. So I'm going to tag Mark Nash, Daniel from GuiltyFeat, Jack the Rambling Raconteur, Hannah from Hannah's Books, Karen from Run Right Reads, Alex from What Page Are You On, Kay the Reader, because I have a feeling Kay, who is just a joyous person, you should definitely check out her channel. You should check out all the channels I'm mentioning, but I have a feeling that perhaps her take on this will be a little bit different. Sonya, the Enthusiastic Reader, Sean the Book Maniac, Alan from Big Hard Books and Classics, Jen from Remembered Reads, and I'm going to tag you here, Steve Donahue, because I want to hear you talk about these topics, even though I think there are going to be some questions on here which you just kind of scoff at, and this would be one of those tags where the question you go, well, I can't possibly answer that question because of the way I read and how my reading works. But I think the bigger questions are ones that you could talk about, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on. So here we go. Question number one. Do you mostly read books illustrating pain or books illustrating joy, and why? Okay, so I think the answer is illustrating pain. And so I will admit to having a little bit of confusion about what that term, illustrating pain, means. Because I wonder if this is really about endings. Do I read books that have painful endings or joyful endings and things like that? And I think Scott and Nell kind of touched on this, most books are about conflict. Most novels, I don't think it matters what genre you're talking about, are about conflict. Conflict between people, conflict between nature. We could go through, whole traditional man versus nature, man versus himself. But whatever it is, most books kind of deal with conflict, and most of that conflict involves, discomfort or pain or some kind of revelation or being forced to change, and, that is pain. And then I think what it comes down to, whether we judge a book as joyful or painful, has to do with the way in which it ends. So for instance, we think about the works of Jane Austen. Jane Austen's books, and I haven't read Emma and I haven't read Mansfield Park. Yes, I think I've read the others. Jane Austen's novels oftentimes involve pain, people who are in pain, whether, unrequited love, worrying about finances, realizing they've been an ass, whatever it is, people who experience pain. That's kind of the source of the drama of the story, but they end happily. So are those joyous books? Are those books that illustrate joy? Or are those books that illustrate pain? If I think about Charles Dickens, and we think about Bleak House, or David Copperfield, or Great Expectations, a lot of what takes place in those books has to do with people suffering. People suffering, emotionally, mentally, physically, that there is a lot of suffering in those books, and yet, Bleak House and David Copperfield end on, a positive note. So are those books that illustrate pain, or are those books that illustrate joy? As it said many times, and I won't go back into this here, I am still a fan of Hemingway's writing, but I struggle to think of a Hemingway story or novel that doesn't end negatively, where there isn't pain. They have a tendency to focus on suffering and unhappiness and how people make one another unhappy, and how people get their hearts broken. So those are books that illustrate a lot of pain and end kind of painfully. So to me, the question has to do with, and I'm not sure. I guess what I'm arguing is that all these books and most books really illustrate pain, but we make our final judgment about whether or not they were about pain or about joy based, maybe on the ending, or based maybe on the feeling they give us at the end. Anyway, so there were my thoughts about that. Question 2, do you see books about pain as more intellectually valuable? Why or why not? So I'm going to say that no, I don't see them as more intellectually valuable, but I do think that we have a tendency to see them that way, because books that illustrate pain, I think, appeal to humanity in a way in which books that illustrate joy don't. And so this is just complete, theory, but and probably not original either. But pain is universal, and we as human beings, across time, across cultural differences, across gender and racial differences, we suffer in the same ways. We suffer because of unrequited love. We suffer because of physical pain. We suffer because of separation from those that we love. We suffer because of events which cause us physical, mental. We kind of suffer in the same way. And so those things I think we think of as universal oftentimes are things which involve suffering. And I won't get in too deep into this, but even to a certain extent, to love someone is to embrace the idea of suffering in a strange way. I'm kind of going to get a lot of negative comments here. But, when you love someone, like when in loving a child, you take on this idea that what hurts them is going to hurt you. And that you want to, help them past that hurt, and you want to be there as a sense of support to make the hurt less for them. But there is a certain amount of kind of pain, suffering, I think, that we embrace there. So, continuing then back to the question, do I see pain as more intellectually valuable? Why or why not? Well, I don't think that studying or reading about pain is more intellectually valuable than reading about joy. I just think it's more common, and stories about pain have a more of a universal appeal because they have a tendency, I think, to resonate with people in different ways, or resonate people in the same way. Whereas in a book that describes, for instance, joy, and illustrates joy more than it illustrates pain, well, what gives one person joy can be vastly different from what gives other people joy. I mentioned about 1,000,000 times that I enjoy fishing. I have a YouTube fishing channel that I neglect on a regular basis now, but it gives me joy to catch fish. I don't know why, I don't understand it, but when I feel the bite and I reel the fish in and I pull this mysterious creature out of the water, and I look at it and then I release it, that whole process gives me joy. Now, not everybody, as a matter of fact, I don't think most people experience joy from that. So if I write, the stereotypical white man writes a story about fishing, I'm trying to express, the joy. I might be trying to express the joy I feel from fishing, and it just completely misses you. You say, well, how can you feel joy from snatching an innocent creature from its habitat and bringing it into a world where it can't breathe and sticking? I agree with you. It's because it does. The answer then is because it does. And so in a sense, what I'm saying then is the things that give us joy are less universal than the things that cause us pain, and therefore I think we have a tendency to see the things that cause us pain as resonating, as being more about the human experience, and therefore people assign them more intellectual weight, even though I don't necessarily think that's fair at all. Question number 3. Why do you think major book prizes like the Booker and Pulitzer Prize award books about pain? And I will go right back to the answer I just gave. That I think it's because they resonate with more people, that they feel more universal, that those experiences of pain and suffering and loss and angst and uncomfortableness or whatever it is, that those books resonate with a larger number of people, and therefore, and they have a tendency then, issues about pain, our books about pain have a tendency to focus on issues like violence, sexual abuse, refugee crises, the way in which young people are mistreated, and therefore they have a tendency to deal with really important social issues, and therefore I think they're seen as being more worthy or more intellectually valuable. Having said all that, some of the books I've read most recently that I've liked the most are books that end with some opportunity for hope, books that are more happy. I've talked about Leonard and Hungry Paul here several times, but Leonard and Hungry Paul to me is a book that's about joy. It involves two men who lead what I'm going to refer to as small lives. Their lives are relatively narrow. They don't involve a whole lot of people, and they are relatively content and happy with the lives they have, and yet they will experience changes which bring more people into their lives and cause them to change, and they still end up being happy. To me, that was kind of a really great book, and I didn't see it get listed for any of the major prizes, even though it was on the list of the Republic of Consciousness Prize, I believe a couple of years ago or last year, which is how I found it. But that book to me was about joy. Now, if you take that book, and I'm not, because of the way book awards work, if you take that book about these, two relatively comfortable white men whose lives are relatively happy and fulfilled, who change and become happier, that doesn't seem nearly as important as the story about perhaps how a young man overcomes or deals with the problems of having an alcoholic, neglectful, abusive mother while trying to come to terms with the fact that he is gay in society, which is prejudice against people who are gay. I mean, if you weigh those two things, that's why I think prizes work out the way they do. I don't necessarily always agree that that's what should happen, but I understand that's why it happens. I hope that made sense. I'm not sure at all. Question 4, do you use and agree with the phrase guilty pleasure, why or why not? I'm sure I use that phrase. I don't mean it anymore the way I probably used to mean it. I've mentioned here I'm a recovering book snob, and I would have in the past referred to, my Inspector Rebus detective novels as a guilty pleasure, because I didn't think, well, they're not literature, and therefore, it's just me having fun. And, over time I've come to realize, and partly thanks to BookTube, that that's just bullshit, that if it gives me pleasure to read, then it's not, I shouldn't feel guilty about it, and I don't. Dogs. Hush now. Go on and lay down. There's a squirrel. There's a squirrel across the street. I don't know how my old blind Ike dog sees it through, a curtain and an opaque window, but apparently he has a sixth sense about squirrels. Anyway, so I do, today when I think about what's a guilty pleasure, I think about things I do that I enjoy that take up time, that keep me from doing things that are probably much more important. I'm one of the world's great procrastinators. I enjoy procrastinating. I relish the time when I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, and I consider those times to be like if I fall down a YouTube wormhole and or rabbit hole, sorry, and end up spending the day watching die-cast car races, or hours watching die-cast car races. I really enjoy that. That is a pleasure. I do feel guilty that it's not probably the best use of my time. But that doesn't have anything to do with me judging those things as being, less entertaining or lesser. Just, is this what I should be doing with my time? So maybe when I think about something a guilty pleasure, I'm thinking about that whole, mythical Protestant work ethic that's supposed to be so firmly ingrained in us here in the United States. Maybe that's what's at play. Question 5. Do you think books centering on joy are guilty pleasures? No, I don't. If I accepted the term guilty pleasure in terms of reading, I would reject it, that there's anything wrong with reading a book that centers on joy. Not at all. And I'm not disparaging the person who made the tag. I understand why that's a follow-up question, but to me that seems silly. And then question 6, do you read in secret? Are there books you read but never talk about because of embarrassment, shame, or guilty about liking them? No. I can't. It's possible at some point in my life that was true. Like I said, I am a recovering book snob, but I don't remember ever hiding or secretly reading books or being ashamed of having read a book. I don't think that that's the case, and certainly now at the age of almost 54, what you think about what I read and whether you think it's worthy or literature or whatever you want to call it, I promise you that has no effect on me whatsoever. I won't go so far as to tell the lie, that many people say that I don't care what people think about me. I think the only people who don't care what people think about them at all are probably sociopaths. So I won't say that, but in terms of reading, no, I don't feel that way at all. I happily will tell you that I read and enjoyed a book about fishing this year, that if I were to read a piece of erotica, which I don't think I've done for so long time, I would feel free and happy to discuss it here on my channel if I thought the BookTube censors wouldn't get to me. So no, I don't feel that way at all. Yeah. So, no, there are no books I'm ashamed of reading. Anyway, that's it. I think those are all the questions for the Pain Over Joy tag. I had fun answering these questions. I'm not sure my answers made a lot of sense. If I tagged you, please feel free to do the tag. Love to hear what you think about some of these prompts. If I didn't tag you and you want to do it anyway, please do the tag, because I think it's really interesting. Anyway, look forward to your comments in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.